Things are getting chippy at Celtics practice. Fun. And I'm talking about it with Tom Westerholm right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
So hype right now. Anything's possible. I'm on mama. I'm on my lady, ma. Anything's possible.
Yeah. Rain and Jay's back with the vengeance. Back. All the real Celtics fans in attendance. This the truth like 34. This like walking in the garden when you hear the roars. The crowd goes crazy. Most in-depth coverage on the daily. Mainly podcast royalty, the content kings. When you talking about the franchise with 17 rings. Focus like Danny at the deadline. Global, but it got a local feel like the red line, the blue line, the green line. Play it in between time. I'ma throw my C's jersey on in the meantime and press play. When the F's done, I can't wait until the next day. Trying to stay in tune with the C's, that's the best way. Melly.
Hey there, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Thank you for starting your day with me, John Karalis of Boston Sports Journal and the author of the Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. I want to thank you for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Now, some of you have said I'm not your first listen, so really, as long as you're listening, I'm okay. But let's try to work on this. Let's try to work on this relationship here. Make the Locked On Celtics podcast your first listen every day. Just move it up the ladder if you can, because we're free, available across all platforms, YouTube, everywhere. And I'd like to think that I'm worth it. Like I said, I'm John Karalis. I cover the team on a daily basis. And today, going to talk about some of the things that came out of practice on Thursday, including the scrap between Marcus Smart and Grant Williams. Not really a scrap, but it was fun. Guys were laughing about it. Intensity, talking about culture being built in Boston and the extreme love for Al Horford, plus what to look for in the Saturday second preseason game. And I'm talking about it all right now with Tom Westerholm of the Geno Time podcast. Tom Westerholm, what's going on, man?
What is going on?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. No news, no. Marcus Smart and Grant Williams getting into a knockdown, drag-out fight in practice.
Fisticuffs, from what I understand.
Karate moves look like a Bruce Lee movie, from what I understand. Sources close to the situation say.
Yeah.
But once again in practice, Robert Williams proving that he is just a gem of a quote. I want to talk to Robert Williams every day, but Grant flopping and shit. So for people who didn't know, Marcus Smart and Grant Williams apparently, got into a little tussle, nothing serious, more yelling back and forth. Apparently Grant flopped during a scrimmage. Marcus Smart, who is a connoisseur of flopping, kind of knows what a flop is and what doesn't, and accused Grant. Grant didn't like it. And so we had a little competitiveness. What I liked, Tom, is that Josh Richardson comes out later, laughs about it. And he says, look, the competition level here in camp is pretty close, compares pretty closely to his days in Miami. And look, hey, NBA buzzword, heat culture. That's something that I think Celtics fans, especially the ones who, flood our mentions, are like, oh, Brad, where's the fire and all that stuff? They probably like to hear something like, hey, look at them, heat culture kind of light or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, it's always interesting because the guys who come out of that heat culture, you always kind of, I don't know, I always kind of expect it to be kind of overblown, just like something that's like, all right, like everybody talks about it. But everybody who comes out of it is always just like, no, like that's super real. Like, that's, basically what Richard said too, was just, yeah, no, like that's legitimate. Anybody can talk to anybody. The competition is, super intense. And like you said, Richardson compared this Celtics crew to that I think also it's worth noting that, like what was Richardson supposed to say? Like, yeah, like the heat culture is real. This Celtics team is just a bunch of pansies. Like, I don't even know what to do with these guys. So, minor note of caution there, but it is, I mean, he sounded pretty sincere about it. He sounded pretty happy to talk about it. So
yeah, that Miami Heat culture, it is a real thing. I think there is something to it. Like, we like to joke about it, but look, I do believe that did serve them well in the bubble. And I think that, carrying that level of discipline, it doesn't work all the time. It's not some magical potion or whatever, but look, it made an impression on Josh Richardson. It is anything that's a signature culture, like the Boston culture for that matter. Guys can be around the league and be like, yeah, Boston, whatever. But invariably, whenever somebody gets there on the parquet and stands underneath those banners, they go, whoa, wait a second. Okay, there's something a little extra to this. The fans make it a little extra. The building gets really, really loud. So I like, look, this intensity, what Ime Udoka is bringing and allowing here is, I think, good. Like, yeah, I hear that Smart and Grant mixed it up in practice. I'm like, yeah, that's good. Let's take that, because that's something that's easily, like, emotions on the floor in practice. You go into the locker room, it's over. No one cares. But that level of intensity, if you're practicing with that level of intensity, you're going to take that on the floor. And how many times you talk on your podcast? I know I talked about it on my podcast a lot. This team last year was missing that chip on its shoulder. We're pining for the days of Jay Crowder and Isaiah Thomas. Now, you get some of that back. I'm sure Ime Udoka noticed that, and to borrow the overused phrase, they got a few dogs in there now, and they're going at it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like, and again, we'll see how it translates, but like, that seems to be what everybody's talking about, right? Like, that's exactly what Rob said. And this is not the first time that guys have talked about the intensity of these practices. It's been kind of a common theme. And I mean, honestly, it would just be fun to have a team like that again. Like, so some of these teams, like, they weren't, last year's team, like, not to go full Geno time on here, but like, it wasn't fun. It was not a fun basketball team to watch for most of the year. And sure, some of that was injuries, like, no question, but like, that lack of intensity just can kind of make for, like, an uninspiring team sometimes. And, you look back at some of those, I know, like, the artists who used to be Weird Celtics Twitter like to, talk about, like, the, like the punk rock Celtics. And I just, that was a fun crew, right? Like, that was just, it was so much fun to watch those guys. I'm like, yeah, I mean, were they over dramatic? Were they kind of, a little over the top with some of this stuff? Of course. Like, they had Jay Crowder. Of course they were like that. But I mean, they were really fun. They were really intense. And, they definitely fed off that and built sort of their own, like we were saying, their own culture. And, that, I do think that's something that these teams have been missing. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why those teams had that, whether it was just kind of the nobody believes in us chip on their shoulder, and then why, I'm not sure why it went away. Maybe it was just a Kyrie thing, and then, they couldn't get it back. Like, I don't know, but it was, it was tangible. And I think, if you wanted to draw the Kyrie through line, you could look at 2017-18 and how that team kind of did have a chip on its shoulder. So, and then obviously when Kyrie went down. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see that again. Those are fun basketball teams to watch, not to be like, the 90s basketball, we got to bring it back. Like, I don't think that, but it is more fun. Yeah, that's you. Yeah, exactly. Well, 80s basketball for you. Right. But yeah, but it is a lot of fun. Those are fun basketball teams.
John, what's it like to have lived all 75 years of the NBA? I will say, side note, I miss Weird Celtics Twitter. I feel like Weird Celtics Twitter was like just a much more innocent time where you could be weird and fun on Twitter and people just didn't jump down your throat. But that's a side note. There was a fun kind of element to that, but it does play along with that was a fun Celtics team. Yeah, man. And it's this team. We don't know how good this team is going to be. We've talked about it ad nauseum so far, and we're still waiting for more evidence to kind of point us in which direction. But we know that the very high end for the Celtics can be really good. The very low end, the floor, can be kind of borderline. And so, if nothing else, wherever they fall, if they're going to go out, you always want to see them go out with a fight. And so that's going to be something that, in contrast to last year's team, for various reasons, this team can be somebody or something that people can at least watch and be, hey, we went down, Miami beat us, but at least we didn't just roll over. I mean, that's the only thing that you can ask for. So that's fun.
100%. I think that is, like, that's the most reasonable outcome to hope for the season. Cause I don't think there's too many people who genuinely think that, the Celtics have real championship aspirations this year. I think there's a lot of people who have, understandable and justifiable optimism about the team going forward, about the direction with Brad Stevens in the front office, about, the players that they could potentially pick up this offseason, whatever it might be. But I think, if you ask, I think it's very reasonable to ask this team to, if you're going to go down swinging, like that's and not only that, that would also make them look like a more fun team to play for, for potential free agents.
Right.
Like it would very much be sort of a multiplying, compounding thing, which, a lot of benefits there.
Yeah. So we're starting to see like the initial elements of the Udoka culture. I mean, here's a guy who scrapped. He had to fight for everything that he got in the NBA. He had to go overseas and come back and kind of pull like a Brad Wanamaker type of career together. And, and now here he is. He's taking that fight into coaching. And this is the stuff that happens when you kind of allow it to happen. So that's in trying to figure out Udoka. This is kind of like, all right, we're starting to get a sense of he wants the dogs. He wants the fight. He wants these guys to go out there and compete hard. And like every coach, you can say that about every coach, but who's really pushing them to do that? Back with a lot more with Tom Westerholm, including the Al Horford extreme love in Boston. After I talk to you about the Sleeper app, fantasy basketball is broken. Sleeper realized that, so they created a whole new way to play fantasy basketball, and it's called Game Pick. This is going to fix the problem of the other team always beating you because they have more games played that week, or that the other team GM has done more of the busy work that you forget to do. Really, I forget to do. And this levels the playing field because each owner picks a single game per week for each starter to count towards the team score. That means it's an even number of games. You can pick those matchups based on who they're playing, home versus away, opponent's defensive ranking, pace of play, and a whole lot more. So the days of mindless busy work are over. It's done. Don't go through that same old draft that you always go through. Get onto the Sleeper app, get into Game Pick, and start a league with your friends. Sleeper has cracked the fantasy basketball code. So download the Sleeper app, start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. Thank you, as always, for making the Locked On Celtics podcast your first listen every day. Still coming up, going to talk about the look ahead to what we're looking for on the Saturday second preseason game, mostly focusing on the offense. I want to have you, if you could, make your second listen the Locked On NBA podcast, which I host on Wednesdays with Jake Madison, rotating hosts all week long, covering the association. Unlike anybody else, free, daily, available everywhere, just like the Locked On Celtics podcast. Now, let's continue the conversation with Tom Westerholm. One other thing that is very clear to me and probably everybody else, Ime Udoka loves Al Horford. Someone tweeted at me and says, find somebody who loves you like Ime loves Al Horford. But on top of that, like all of the guys seem to love Al Horford. Schroeder has that connection. Rob's gushing about him in practice there on Thursday. Jaylen Brown says Al's got my vote for captain out of the blue. Al Horford's back, and it's like, oh, thank you. Like both sides are just hugging it out and be like, thank you for coming back. Thank you for bringing me back. Like the Al Horford love right now is off the charts.
That's out of control. It's completely out of control.
I mean, it's wild.
And it's, it's funny because like there really is this kind of through line, right? Where like Horford left and like, there just was something missing. And, Jason and Jaylen both experienced what it was like to have not prime, but just out of his prime, Al Horford on the team. And they experienced what it was like without him. And, there was that kind of off season where Horford was on the team, obviously. But yeah, I mean, these guys clearly like him a lot. And it is funny how many, threads he kind of ties together, because even the guys who weren't on last year's team, even the guys who weren't there in 2017-18, they all have experience with them. Like you said, Schroeder, Josh Richardson, like these guys all have played with Al. And it's cool to see how much everybody respects him and how, kind of legitimate all the things that you think about Al Horford are, right? Like you think to yourself like, oh, this guy must be, a good dude, like easy to get along with, somebody who can kind of lead young guys. And then you kind of wonder like, well, okay, where are we like, overblowing this? And the answer seems to be no. Like he is just a, genuinely, I don't know, like popular, decent dude in the locker room, and that goes a long way. So yeah, credit to Al Horford, man. Everybody really likes the guy.
This is like any old John Cusack movie where, somebody's running back through the rain, playing some like popular, love song, Take Me Back song. And, there's this big dramatic like crescendo, and it's Al's back, and there's Brad's looking down from a window, and there's the connection back again. It's wild how much of a connection this team has to Al, and how much they've needed a guy like that. We've talked about veteran presence in the locker room, and the Kyrie year, the last Kyrie year, that following year, they drafted all these nice guys. Grant Williams is such a nice guy. They focused on high character guys. I feel like there's always this reaction. You get rid of, what's his name, from last year, why am I drawing a blank on our center that we just traded away from last year? I hate.
Well, Enes Kanter's back, so I have no answer.
No, the other guy.
And
Tristan Thompson. Thank you, John.
You don't hate Daniel Tice. Yeah, Tristan Thompson.
The reaction to Tristan Thompson, who I firmly believe poisoned that Celtics locker room just a tiny bit, just enough. Not that he's a bad guy, but that whole regular season is horse shit line meant something, resonated with the locker room. He's the reason why guys spent 2 hours after games in the locker room and not that I'm upset that I had to wait that long for Jason Tatum post-game interview, but
I am.
I'm a little upset about it.
Yeah.
But the reaction, okay, Tristan's out. Now here's Al Horford back to kind of like snap things back into place and be professional. And this is how you handle yourself. And everybody's like, oh, you know what? Thank you for being back here.
It's very funny how the opposite is also true, right? Like, Horford went to Philadelphia and got blamed for a lot of things that it's pretty clear this season were not all his fault. Like, I don't think Al Horford had a good season in Philadelphia, but I don't think Philadelphia's struggles were exclusively Al Horford's fault. I think that is pretty clear. And then, yeah. And then he goes to Oklahoma City, and it's like, the poor guy was playing really well and then just gets like, the rug swept out from under him. Like, nope, you need to stop playing so well because, we really have to go out and draft Josh Giddey. So like, you really feel for the guy because like those must have been some kind of hard years for him. And, now he gets to come back. Like the mutual relief on both sides is very funny to me. I enjoy it quite a bit.
I really believe, and maybe one of these days I'll ask Ime Udoka about this. There's a middle finger to Philly somewhere in Udoka's brain somehow when it comes to Al Horford, where he's mentioned so many times now, at least 3-4 times, we're like, yeah, we just didn't use him right. We didn't take advantage of certain things. And I really feel like part of the reason why he's so very clearly going to start Al Horford in whatever configuration, either as the 5 or the 4, is kind of like, hey, somebody get Brooke Brown on the phone and tell him to watch how it's done. I think there's going to be some of that. Now imagine what a great trolling that would be of Philly, where Al Horford comes back to Boston and does well at the 4. And people are like, wait a minute, that can work? And I'm not going to say that it will happen, but there is a universe where somebody in Philly writes, hey, maybe Joel Embiid is the problem, and points to Al Horford works at the 4 in Boston with a center who's willing to kind of work with him at the 4 and, a coach who's willing to kind of use him in a certain way. Why is it that no one can really play with Joel Embiid in Philly? Like, I think there's some sort of universe where that becomes a storyline.
I'm expecting to see in the Philadelphia Inquirer a freelancer named Karalis writing about why Joel Embiid is actually the problem and Al Horford was not. But if I know anything about your opinions on Joel Embiid, however,
me with just like a real horrible hairpiece.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, like, I think it's not impossible that there's, some middle finger going on there. And it was, it was kind of funny. Gary Washburn in the Globe asked Josh Richardson today during his press conference, like, about the Celtics Sixers rivalry too. And Richardson was just kind of like, well, listen, Joel shut that down every time when I was there because like he just said the Celtics kick our ass every time. So that was maybe the middle finger isn't sent back Boston's way, but yeah, I mean, it's certainly plausible. Like that Philadelphia team was, I think, as disastrous as the 2018-19 Celtics. Like it really felt like they just traded places that season. So it's not out of the question, certainly.
Whole lot more with Tom to wrap up the show. Looking ahead to the Saturday preseason game number 2. First, I got to talk to you about BetOnline, your number one spot to bet on all your favorite sports, pro and college football, in full swing right now, and people love to bet on football. You can do it at BetOnline with a new updated site and interface, more odds, props, and contests. BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. You can even bet on basketball, boxing, your favorite Vegas casino games. It's all right there. So head on over to the website, use your mobile device to sign up today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Whatever you deposit, $200, you get a $100 welcome bonus on your first deposit with the promo code LOCKEDON. So head on over to BetOnline. It is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. Then head on over to Built Bar to get yourself some of the best tasting protein bars on the market. This is, I just placed an order myself. I ordered 2 boxes, and you can do a mixed box. You can do a custom box. I did a custom box with 3 flavors. I got myself salted caramel, I got myself double chocolate, and I got a mint brownie. So that's going to carry me through the next couple of months. Basically, as I go to the gym, I'm going to have a nice protein bar that gives me 17 to 18 grams of protein, but 130 to 180 calories, not going to blow out what I do when I do my cardio. Plus 4 or 5 grams of sugar, 4 or 5 net carbs. Very healthy, very delicious. Built Bar, the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team and NASCAR for a reason. Go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15. Use it every single time. You're going to get 15% off every time you go back. So sample a few, stock up on your favorite ones, whichever one it is. Go back to Built.com often and use that promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order of the best tasting protein bars on the market. Thank you as always for making the Locked On Celtics podcast your number one first listen of the day. Why don't you make your second listen of the day the Locked On Bets podcast? If you've signed up for BetOnline, the Locked On Bets podcast will help you get through some of those tricky betting lines. We'll tell you wrong team favored. We'll tell you where the locks are of the day. Maybe they can help you make a couple of extra bucks. So check out the Locked On Bets podcast with your boy Q and Lee Sterling. Now check out the rest of my conversation with Tom Westerholm of the Geno Time podcast. The first preseason game gave us some information. Now, I've heard you guys talking on your podcast about what it meant to start Juancho. Here's my theory. You tell me what you think about this. I think the starting lineup in that first preseason game is actually like the Celtics started that game about 5 minutes into a normal regular season game. That what Ime was looking for, because I'm basically hanging on the "we know what we have in Al" phrase, and that Juancho is basically the first sub with Rob. You sub out Al early, and you bring him back with Schroeder. As we were talking about before the game, I'm huge on that Schroeder Horford pairing, and I was saying that before we even saw how good it looked in the first quarter of that game. I think Juancho is more going to be the first guy off the bench. Horford sits after a short stint. You pair him with Schroeder more often than not. Maybe it's with Richardson. Maybe it's not. We'll see. But I think that's more what we're going to look at. And I think that means starting Rob with Al Horford.
Yeah. So that logically, that makes a lot of sense. I really have a hard time seeing those two working together, like Al and Rob. My concern is just Al's 3-point shooting. Like, I don't totally believe in it. I think I believe in a lot of things with Al Horford. I believe he makes the defense better. I believe he makes the offense better with all his passing. I believe he should start. I'm right there with Ime Udoka that Al Horford, I also will be hinting for the next, week and a half that Al Horford should be starting. But I just like that pairing is a little concerning to me, on both ends. I'm not sure, especially the Celtics are switching everything. It's like, do you feel comfortable with both Al and Rob switching everything? Like if that's what they're going to continue to do. Obviously, Ime kind of hinted that, switch everything might just kind of have been the game plan in that first game. But, I like that combination. I don't think offers a whole lot of shooting. I think it's a little bit too easy to, kind of double up and to kind of, game plan double teams for Jalen and Jason in that scenario. On the other hand, I also don't totally know what the other options are. I mean, I kind of floated Peyton Pritchard like before the season just because of the shooting, but I also don't think that like Marcus Smart would super appreciate having another point guard in the starting lineup right after he finally got the starting point guard job, like exclusively. I don't know. But to me, Horford and Rob is a little bit, it's a little bit too dinosaur. It's a little bit too just like two big men, too, a little bit not quite versatile enough, not quite enough shooting. But again, the other options aren't like perfect either. It's not like Josh Richardson or Dennis Schroeder offers that much shooting either. So it's tough, man. I personally don't see it, but I do think that Horford's going to be in the starting lineup, and I do think that it's very reasonable to think that Juancho is going to be one of the first bigs off the bench. Like that all makes sense for sure. I also, and to your point, I obviously do not think that Juancho will be the starter on opening night either.
I mean, who knows? Maybe that becomes. I think what Udoka has been pointing to is Al at the 4 as the matchup problem. That if you're gonna force the other team to play either big on Tatum and Brown, mostly Tatum, and small on Horford, where you're going to do that, what Philly couldn't do, or play big on Al, play smaller on Tatum, and then Tatum just tears that mismatch apart, which is why they're starting to use him in some of the post-ups, because they're really emphasizing him going up against smaller players. I think what Udoka is trying to gear towards is forcing the other team to put a smaller player on Tatum going into the mid post and torching that matchup. So far, that all of the pieces seem to point to that. Is it going to work? You're right. Al Horford's 3-point shooting, it needs to get better, and he needs to be more consistent with it. And if he is, it goes back to the same thing as Marcus Smart in a way, although he's a better shooter than Marcus Smart, obviously. It's the threat. How much of a threat can you be?
Probably a better shooter than Marcus Smart. Yeah, anyway.
I mean, maybe, but how much of a threat can you be? Do you have to be guarded? That's the thing. And if the other team has their guy 2 or 3 extra steps off of you, then that's not good enough. If they have to guard you like they're afraid that you're going to start hitting these shots and you can hit 2-3 in a row, then even if you don't hit those 2 or 3 in a row, as long as the defense is up on you, you're still kind of accomplishing the similar goal as far as, on this team. Now, if Tatum starts shooting 33%, you got a problem because you need him to actually hit the shots. Yeah. But for Horford, it'd be nice if he hit some of those shots, but it's more opening up the space for everybody else. So we'll see, I think, whether the two bigs can work here. I think that's at least going to be how the season starts. Now, I don't know how they're going to start on Saturday, but I am looking forward to what new combinations, what new defensive things are they going to try, because they switched. I mean, how many stories have been written about the Celtics defensive switching? How much have we talked about the Celtics switching? It's been like the big on-court storyline.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if they tried something different in this game just to try. I think Ime's style is like, all right, we're going to flood you with this, and then we're going to look at the film. We're going to just take this one game and be like, this game is all, I don't know, zone. This game is all going over screens. This is whatever it is, like just really overemphasize something, have you do it, make your mistakes, and then get it on film. And then you can take what works best out of each of those things.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point, and I like that. That's kind of a cool way to do things, because instead of just getting like a 2-minute stretch of film to look at, you get like a whole game, you get all the different looks with it. You get to see like maybe Dennis Schroeder maybe if you're switching, if you're switching schemes throughout the game, maybe Schroeder just wasn't in when you were switching, and now you don't have any film on Schroeder switching. So no, that's a really good point. I hope that's what he does. I have no idea, but like that'd be fun. Like that'd be a fun way to evaluate the preseason. That'd be a good call. Maybe you should. I don't know. Maybe you should try coaching, Karalis.
No, I should not try coaching.
Your hair might turn gray.
I mean, I'll be happy to coach for a couple years and make a little extra money until I get fired. But I think that overemphasizing learning, the style of learning actually works. It's kind of funny. When I was at Emerson, I'd take a class called Voice and Articulation because I had a wicked bad Rhode Island accent when I was growing up. And that's how they teach you. You overemphasize your R's, your ERs, and you kind of like teach your body to do that thing so much that when you relax and you pull back, you get to where you need to be. And it is kind of similar in basketball because it's all muscle memory. It's all getting you to a point where you can react to what you see. And if you're just hammering that home for 2 weeks, that's kind of this deep immersion. It's like, okay, let's pull you out of that and now hammer this other thing home for a week and then pull back. And then your body starts to get used to that extreme thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he tries something completely different in game 2. Anything else in that game on Saturday that you're looking for?
I mean, just like basic stuff that we saw not work in, game 1. Like I would like to see Rob Williams go to the hoop once or twice instead of shooting. That was a tough for Rob. I thought it was funny that he got asked about that today, and he was just kind of like, he just kind of like dodged around it. He was like, yeah, just whatever. But it's like, no, Rob, you should not be shooting those jumpers. They look awful. But yeah, I mean, I think just kind of generally, I am curious to see what the Celtics offense looks like if they shoot a little better. Like, I know that's like simplistic, but it's like, there's only so much evaluation offensively you can do when every shot is missing. And, I think that there, and I think that if they struggle again, obviously it's preseason, but you do start to wonder a little bit like, okay, we have concerns about this team's offense, right? Yeah. Like there are legitimate concerns about whether this team has enough shooting. And certainly I don't think that, I don't think Jason Tatum's going to always have whatever. What did he have? Like 16 points on 18 shots or vice versa. Obviously he's, a much better player than that. And he's going to have a lot of really good games and all of that. But at the same time, I would like to see the offense look a little better. It is a genuine concern that their offense doesn't have enough firepower. And if we don't see ways that rectifies itself, or at very least avenues where it gets better, I think it's something to start watching for. Not something to panic about, not something to be like, all right, it's time to blow this up, but something to watch.
Yeah, to that point, I think I want to see Marcus Smart point guard a little more than he did in the first game. I think he might have. I want to see Smart kind of control the game a little bit, not dominate the game, but like just one of the things that I'm looking for from this offense to do all the stuff that you just said. I think it does start with Smart just kind of understanding what everyone is trying to do and kind of guiding the offense a little bit, setting things up. Maybe you set it up with a few Rob pick and rolls and you try to get to the rim that way. I really think that because there hasn't been much continuity with these guys and they were moving so fast in that game. I mean, when Ime said after the game, I think they listened to me a little too much. I thought that was actually kind of funny, but astute, that like part of the downside of this immersion was they really tried to move fast. And then they started playing too fast. They didn't play with good pace, which is playing that fast. They played too fast, which meant timing was way off. First preseason game, obviously this is going to be a problem, but timing was really way off. Marcus made a couple of really ill-advised passes in the interest, I think, of moving the ball, but not even really paying attention to where the help defender was. So I'd like to see just a little bit pulling back to, all right, let's play with a faster pace. Let's push the ball. Let's move the ball on offense in the half court, but let's Marcus be just a tiny bit more point guard than he was in the first game. I think that might help settle some things down.
Well, I mean, I think it'll be interesting too, because Jalen and Jason, like they were expected to handle the ball more, right? Like that was a big preseason storyline, was how much those guys were also gonna handle the ball, how much those guys were gonna be, distributors as well, and kind of, primary handlers. So I mean, it is interesting. I think that Smart could certainly handle the ball more and maybe direct the offense a little bit more, but both of those guys were expected to be expected to have the ball in their hands more as well. So
Yeah.
that balance, I think, will be really interesting to watch.
I think more. I expect Tatum and Mason to handle the ball more transition. That this is not going to be a Tatum rebounds outlet to Smart. Smart sets the offense. It's more Tatum's got the rebound. Go look up, see what you have on your wings, but go. Don't bother looking for anything. This isn't Chris Paul dominating the offense. This is
Right.
grab it and go. And then once you get into the half court and you want to set something up, then you can get to Smart and he can set things up. But it's almost like never mind. I am with you on the mix of who handles the ball when, and we'll just see. We'll see how that all shakes out, on Saturday, and then we'll be talking about it all next week. So check out Tom's podcast. Actually, don't check out Tom's podcast. This is a competing podcast. Do whatever you do. Do not listen to the Geno Time podcast with Tom Westerholm and Chris Grenham and Nicole Yang. Delete it if you have. Just do not at all. I implore you. Please. You're encroaching on my turf.
The unlocked Celtics pod. Never mind.
Geno
Time. This is why you don't listen to Geno Time, is because I have no clever counter when Karalis goes in on my podcast. Like we got nothing. There's nothing there.
But you got your own beer, which is really cool. And
yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
It is very, very cool. I am very jealous about that.
Shout out to the Shades On Beer Company in West.
I've gone from brewery to brewery, and they keep saying no. So I'm gonna steal that idea at some point. Tom, thank you very much.
Appreciate you, man.
Always a fun conversation with Tom. We used to work together at Mass Live. Now he's at Boston.com, and I'm obviously at Boston Sports Journal, but we still remain friends. We sat next to each other at the first preseason game. So it's good to talk to him. Always love talking basketball with Tom. You can follow him at Tom_NBA on Twitter. Follow me at RedsArmy_John. Shoot me a note. Tell me what you think of the podcast. I would love to hear more from you. Comment in the YouTube video. Subscribe to the YouTube video. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and spread the word. Let more people know that this podcast exists. Keep pushing forward. I want to hear more about how much you love the podcast. Please. It fills my heart. It fulfills me. Maybe it boosts my ego a little bit too. Share the podcast. Please tell your friends that they should be listening to the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network.